The rain fell softly over the streets of Chicago, turning the asphalt into a mirror of blurred city lights. It was nearly midnight, and the parking lot of the corporate building stood almost empty, save for a few scattered cars that looked abandoned under the dim glow of the street lamps. Inside a modest gray sedan, parked in the farthest corner, Lauren sat with her forehead pressed against the steering wheel. Her hands trembled as they gripped the leather, her knuckles white. The tears came slowly at first, hot, silent, stubborn, but then they broke free, and she couldn't stop them anymore. She had held it together all day. Through the meeting. Through the humiliation. Through the moment her boss had thrown her report across the table in front of everyone, calling her work mediocre and uninspired. Through the laughter that followed. The whispers. The eyes that didn't meet hers as she gathered the scattered pages from the floor. She had smiled, nodded, apologized. But now, alone in her car with the rain drumming softly on the roof, she let herself fall apart. Lauren didn't hear the footsteps approaching. She didn't notice the shadow that paused beside her window. She didn't see him at first. The man in the long black coat, standing perfectly still in the rain, watching her with an expression that was impossible to read. He didn't move closer, he didn't knock. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, his dark eyes fixed on her with a quiet intensity that would have unnerved anyone else. But there was no threat in his posture. No impatience, just presence. When Lauren finally lifted her head, wiping her face with the back of her hand, she froze. There was a man outside her car. Her heart jumped, and for a moment, fear flickered through her chest. But then she looked at him, really looked, and the fear didn't grow. He wasn't leaning in. He wasn't smiling in that predatory way men sometimes did. He was just standing there, soaked by the rain, his expression calm and unreadable. He tilted his head slightly, as if asking a silent question. "Are you okay?" Lauren blinked, confused. She cracked the window open just an inch, her voice hoarse. "Can I help you?" "No," he said quietly. His voice was low, smooth, almost gentle. "But I think you might need help." She stared at him, her throat tightening again. "I'm fine." He didn't argue. He didn't push. He just nodded slowly, as if he understood that she wasn't fine at all, and that she didn't want to admit it. "You've been sitting here for over an hour," he said. "In the rain. Alone?" Lauren's breath caught. Had he been watching her? The thought should have scared her. But somehow it didn't. "I'm just tired," she whispered. "I know," he said simply. There was something in the way he said it, like he understood exhaustion on a level most people didn't, like he carried his own weight, invisible and heavy. Lauren didn't know why, but she opened the door. He stepped back immediately, giving her space. She climbed out slowly, her legs weak, her body still trembling from the tears she'd been holding in for hours. The rain soaked through her blouse within seconds, but she didn't care. She just stood there, looking at him. Up close he was even more striking. Tall, composed, with sharp features softened only by the shadows and the rain. His coat was expensive, tailored, dark, immaculate despite the weather. His shoes gleamed even in the dim light. Everything about him screamed wealth, but it wasn't ostentatious. It was quiet, controlled. "You're going to catch a cold," he said, his tone matter of fact. Lauren let out a shaky laugh. "That's the least of my problems." He didn't smile, but something shifted in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "Bad day?" he asked. "Bad year," she corrected, wrapping her arms around herself. He studied her for a moment, then reached into his coat and pulled out a sleek black umbrella. He opened it and held it over her head, shielding her from the rain. He didn't move under it himself. He just stood there getting soaked, as if it didn't matter. "You don't have to do that," Lauren said, her voice barely audible. "I know." She looked up at him, confused. "Then why are you?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze was steady, calm, almost protective. "Because you look like you've been carrying too much for too long." Lauren's chest tightened. She didn't know this man. She didn't know his name, where he came from, or why he was here. But in that moment, standing in the rain under his umbrella, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Safe. "I don't even know you," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "But that doesn't mean I can't help. Why would you want to?" He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Then, so softly she almost didn't hear it, he said, "Because I know what it's like to feel invisible." Lauren's breath hitched. She wanted to ask him what he meant. She wanted to ask him who he was. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just stood there, staring at him, as the rain fell around them and the city hummed in the distance. "Come on," he said gently, nodding toward the street. "There's a cafe 2 blocks from here, still open. You need to get warm. You don't have to talk," he interrupted, his voice still calm, still steady. "You don't have to explain anything. Just ... Come with me, please." Lauren didn't know why she nodded. She didn't know why she trusted him, but she did. And for the first time that night, she didn't feel completely alone. The cafe was small, tucked between 2 larger buildings, its warm light spilling onto the wet sidewalk like a refuge. Inside, it was quiet. Just a few late-night patrons scattered at corner tables, lost in their own worlds. The smell of coffee and old books filled the air, and soft jazz played from somewhere unseen. He led her to a table near the back, away from the windows, away from the eyes of strangers. He pulled out a chair for her, waited until she sat, then took the seat across from her. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Lauren wrapped her hands around the warm mug of coffee he'd ordered for her without asking what she wanted. She hadn't realized how cold she was until now. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the cup to her lips. He didn't drink. He just watched her, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to stay," Lauren said quietly, staring into her coffee. "I'm okay now." "No, you're not." She looked up at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "You're not okay," he repeated, his tone gentle but firm. "And that's fine. You don't have to be." Lauren felt her throat tighten again. She set the mug down, afraid she might drop it. "You don't know anything about me. I know enough." "How?" He leaned back slightly, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "I know what it looks like when someone's been broken down. When they've been told they're not enough. When they've been made to feel small." He paused. "I've seen it before. In yourself?" Lauren asked before she could stop herself. His jaw tightened, just barely. "In people I care about." There was something in the way he said it. Something heavy, something unresolved. Lauren wanted to ask more, but she didn't. Instead, she looked down at her hands, her voice barely a whisper. "My boss humiliated me today. In front of everyone. I worked so hard on that project and he just threw it away. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing." He didn't respond immediately. He just watched her, his expression softening in a way that made her chest ache. "You're not nothing," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "He's wrong. You don't even know what I did. I don't need to." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "I can see who you are. And whoever told you that you weren't enough was lying." Lauren's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to process the sincerity in his voice, the way he looked at her like she mattered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why do you care?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly she almost missed it, he said, "Because no one did it for me when I needed it most." They sat in silence after that, the weight of his words settling between them like a fragile truce. Lauren studied him. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his hands rested calmly on the table, the quiet control in every movement. He was a man who didn't need to prove anything. A man who commanded respect without asking for it. And yet, there was something else beneath the surface. Something wounded. "What's your name?" she asked finally. He hesitated. For the first time since they'd met, he seemed uncertain. "Does it matter?" "Maybe," he smiled then. Barely, just a slight curve at the corner of his mouth, but it was enough. "You can call me Sebastian." Sebastian, she repeated softly. It felt right somehow. Strong, quiet, elegant. And you? Lauren. He nodded, as if committing it to memory. Lauren. The way he said her name made her heart skip. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't performative. It was just not careful. Like he was holding something precious. What do you do, Sebastian? She asked, curiosity creeping in despite herself. I solve problems, he said carefully. What kind of problems? His dark eyes flickered with something unreadable. The kind most people don't want to think about. Lauren should have pressed. She should have asked more. But something in his tone told her not to. So instead, she asked something else. Do you like it, what you do? He considered the question, his gaze drifting to the rain-streaked window. I'm good at it. That's not the same thing. No, she agreed quietly. It's not. He looked back at her, and for a moment, something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition. Two people who were good at things that didn't make them happy. Two people who carried weight no one else could see. Why do you stay? He asked. At that job. With people who don't see you. Lauren's chest tightened. Because I have bills to pay. Because I don't have anywhere else to go. Because ... I don't know. Maybe I'm afraid of what happens if I leave. And what happens if you stay? She didn't have an answer for that. Sebastian leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. You deserve more than this, Lauren. More than people who make you feel small. More than crying alone in parking lots. I don't even know what more looks like anymore, she admitted, her voice breaking. Then let me show you. Lauren's breath hitched. What do you mean? He reached into his coat and pulled out a sleek black card, matte, elegant, with nothing but a phone number embossed in silver. He slid it across the table toward her. If you ever need help, he said quietly. If you ever need someone to listen. If you ever just need to not be alone. Call me. Lauren stared at the card, her heart pounding. Why would you do that? Because I can, he said simply. And because you shouldn't have to carry everything by yourself. Lauren picked up the card slowly, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the smooth surface. It felt impossibly light, and yet it carried a weight she couldn't quite explain. She looked up at Sebastian, searching his face for answers she knew he wouldn't give. I don't understand you, she whispered. You don't have to. But I want to. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe. Or something deeper. He leaned back, his expression guarded once more. Some things are better left unknown. Why? Because once you know, you can't unknow. And I don't want to put that on you. Lauren's chest tightened. There was danger in his words, she realized. Not the kind that threatened her, but the kind that came from a world she didn't understand. A world he was protecting her from. Are you in trouble? She asked softly. No. He paused. But I live in a place where trouble is always close. Then why help me? Why risk getting involved with someone like me? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because you remind me that not everything is dark. That there are still people worth protecting. Lauren felt tears prick at her eyes again, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from something else. Something she couldn't name. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. The city was quieter now, almost peaceful. Sebastian stood slowly, his movements graceful and controlled. He reached for his coat, preparing to leave. Wait, Lauren said suddenly, standing as well. He paused, looking at her with those calm, unreadable eyes. Will I see you again? She asked, her voice barely audible. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, really looked at her, as if memorizing every detail. Then, so softly she almost missed it, he said, If you need me, I'll be there. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a declaration. It was simply a fact. And somehow, that made it more powerful than anything else he could have said. Lauren watched as he walked toward the door, his silhouette framed by the soft light of the cafe. He paused at the threshold, glancing back at her one last time. "Take care of yourself, Lauren," he said quietly. And then he was gone. Lauren stood in the cafe for a long time after he left, the black card still clutched in her hand. She didn't know who Sebastian really was. She didn't know what kind of life he led, what shadows he walked through, or what dangers he faced. But she knew one thing: he had seen her. Really seen her. In a way no one else had in years. She tucked the card carefully into her pocket and walked out into the cool night air. The city felt different now. Less oppressive, less lonely. The rain had washed everything clean, and the lights reflected off the wet pavement like scattered stars. As she drove home, Lauren couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he'd stood in the rain without flinching, about the quiet strength in his voice, about the way he'd offered her help without asking for anything in return. She didn't know if she'd ever call the number on that card. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again. But for the first time in months, she felt something she thought she'd lost: hope. Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the dark water, Sebastian stood by the window, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He thought about the woman with the tired eyes and the trembling hands. The woman who cried alone in parking lots. The woman who carried too much and asked for too little. He didn't know why he'd stopped. He didn't know why she'd gotten under his skin. But he knew one thing: he would keep his promise. If she ever needed him, he would be there. Because some people were worth protecting, even if they never knew the cost. And maybe, just maybe, she would be the one to remind him that there was still light in the world. 3 days passed before Lauren found herself staring at the black card again. She had tried to go back to normal. Tried to pretend that night in the rain hadn't happened. That Sebastian hadn't looked at her like she was someone worth saving. That his quiet presence hadn't made her feel safer than she'd felt in years. But normal felt hollow now. Work was the same exhausting cycle. Her boss barely acknowledged her existence except to criticize. Her coworkers whispered behind her back. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like a constant reminder that she was trapped in a life that was slowly suffocating her. And every night, when she got home to her small apartment, she would pull out that card and run her fingers over the embossed numbers, wondering what would happen if she called. Would he answer? Would he even remember her? On the 4th night, something broke. Lauren sat on her couch, still in her work clothes, staring at the wall. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister asking if she was okay. She didn't have the energy to lie anymore. She didn't have the energy to pretend she was holding it together. Before she could talk herself out of it, she picked up the card and dialed the number. It rang once, twice, then his voice low and steady. Lauren. Her breath caught. He'd known it was her. He'd saved her number somehow, even though she'd never given it to him. "How did you?" she started, but her voice broke. "Are you okay?" he asked, and there was something in his tone that made her chest tighten. Not pity, just concern. Real concern. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just ... I didn't know who else to call." There was a pause. Then quietly, "Where are you?" "Home. Give me the address." Lauren hesitated. This was insane. She barely knew this man. But something in her, something desperate and exhausted and so incredibly lonely, made her tell him anyway. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Sebastian said. "Don't go anywhere." The line went dead before she could respond. 19 minutes later, there was a knock on her door. Lauren opened it to find Sebastian standing in the hallway, looking exactly as he had that night in the rain. Composed, elegant, impossibly calm. But this time, in the harsh light of her apartment building, she could see more details. The fine lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. The tension in his shoulders that he carried so well most people wouldn't notice. The way his dark eyes softened when they landed on her. "Hi," she said weakly. "Hi," he replied. They stood there for a moment, and Lauren realized she had no idea what to say. She'd called him in a moment of desperation, and now he was here, and she felt suddenly foolish. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have called. I don't know what I was thinking." "Don't," he interrupted gently. Don't apologize for reaching out. He stepped inside when she moved aside, his presence somehow making her small apartment feel even smaller. But not in a suffocating way. In a way that felt grounding. Nice place, he said. Though they both knew it wasn't. It was modest. Cluttered with books and half-empty coffee mugs. The furniture worn and mismatched. You don't have to lie, Lauren said, closing the door. I'm not. He turned to look at her. It feels like you. That's what makes it nice. She didn't know what to say to that. Sebastian moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Tell me what happened. Nothing happened. That's the problem. Lauren sank onto the couch, wrapping her arms around herself. Everything's just the same. And I realize I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending I'm okay when I'm not. He was quiet for a moment, his back still to her. What do you want to do about it? I don't know. Quit my job? Start over somewhere else? Run away to another city? She laughed bitterly. Except I can't afford any of that. I'm stuck. You're not stuck, Sebastian said, turning to face her. You're scared. That's different. Is it? Yes. He moved closer, sitting in the chair across from her. Being stuck means you have no options. Being scared means you have options, but you're afraid to take them. Lauren looked at him, really looked at him. You sound like you know what that's like. I do. His expression darkened slightly. I've made choices out of fear, and I've made choices despite it. The second kind are always harder, but they're also the ones I don't regret. What kind of choices? She asked softly. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Then, carefully, the kind that change everything. They talked for hours after that. Sebastian didn't tell her everything. She could sense the walls he kept up, the parts of himself he held back, but he told her enough. About growing up in a world where strength was currency and vulnerability was weakness. About learning to survive by becoming someone people feared. About the loneliness that came with power, the isolation that came with respect. I built everything I have by being someone I'm not sure I like, he admitted at one point, his voice barely above a whisper. Lauren's heart ached at the honesty in his words. Then why do you keep doing it? Because it's all I know. And because the people who depend on me need me to be that person. He looked at her. But sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just stop. To be someone else. Who would you be? She asked. He smiled slightly, sadly. I don't know, maybe someone like you. Someone real. I'm not that special, Lauren said quietly. You're wrong about that. Sebastian leaned forward, his gaze intense. You're exhausted and you're hurting and you still show up every day, you still try. That takes more strength than anything I've ever done. Lauren felt tears prick at her eyes. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know enough. He paused. I know you called me when you were struggling instead of suffering alone. I know you opened your door to a stranger because some part of you believed he wouldn't hurt you. I know you're sitting here being honest about your pain instead of hiding behind a mask. His voice softened. That's courage, Lauren. Real courage. She wiped at her eyes, trying to keep the tears from falling. I don't feel courageous. You don't have to feel it for it to be true. They sat in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt like understanding. Like two people who'd been alone for so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Can I ask you something? Lauren said finally. Anything. Why me? Why did you stop that night? Why are you here now? She looked at him. You said you solve problems. This isn't a problem you need to solve. So why? Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Something vulnerable and raw and so deeply human it took her breath away. Because when I saw you crying in that car, he said slowly, I saw myself. 5 years ago. 10 years ago. Every moment I've ever felt invisible or worthless or so tired I didn't know how to keep going. He met her eyes. And I thought, if I could help you even a little, maybe it would mean something. Maybe it would prove that not everything I touch turns cold. Lauren's breath hitched. Sebastian. You don't have to say anything. he said quickly. I just needed you to know. You're not a charity case. You're not a problem I'm solving. You single quotes, read double quotes, he paused, searching for words. You're someone who makes me remember why any of this matters. The night grew deeper around them, but neither of them moved to leave. Lauren made tea. Something simple, calming. And they sat together in her small living room, talking about everything and nothing. About dreams they'd given up on. About moments that had changed them. About the strange, unexpected connection forming between two people who should have remained strangers. At some point, Lauren fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from emotion and honesty. When she woke a few hours later, there was a blanket draped over her that hadn't been there before. And Sebastian was still there, sitting in the chair across from her, watching the window as dawn began to break over the city. You stayed, she said, her voice rough with sleep. He turned to look at her, and there was something soft in his expression. I told you I would be here if you needed me. I'm okay now, she said. You don't have to stay. I know. But he didn't move. Lauren sat up slowly, pushing the blanket aside. Sebastian ... What are we doing? I don't know, he admitted. But whatever it is, I don't want to stop. Her heart skipped. This is complicated. I know. You have a life I don't understand. A world I can't be part of. I know that too. Then what? Lauren. He stood, moving closer until he was crouching in front of the couch, eye level with her. I don't have answers. I don't know how this works or where it goes. All I know is that for the first time in years, I want to figure it out. With you. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the elegance and the control and the careful walls. She saw someone just as lost as she was, just as tired, just as desperate for something real. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. He reached out slowly, carefully, and took her hand. His touch was warm, steady. But maybe we can be scared together. Lauren squeezed his hand, and something shifted in her chest. Not certainty. Not answers. Just possibility. Okay, she said softly. Sebastian smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine, and nodded. As the sun rose over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they sat together in comfortable silence. Two souls who had been alone for too long, finding something unexpected in each other. Something fragile and new and worth protecting. Lauren didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if she'd find the courage to leave her job, or if Sebastian would ever fully let her into his world. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than exhaustion. She felt hope. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something that could heal them both.